Hey guys, and welcome back. So today we're going to continue our journey into medical mushrooms. Last time we talked about reishi, right? The mushroom that looked like somebody went into the woods with a can of varnish. And today we're going to talk about turkey tail. And honestly, whoever named this mushroom didn't put a lot of extra oomph into it, right? There was no overthinking involved. It was like, what does this look like? And the other guy was like, well, a turkey tail. And then they said, great, we're moving on. Do you guys want to get lunch? Because they didn't really put a lot into it, because it does look like a turkey tail. So don't let that very obvious name fool you, though, because this little mushroom is going to take us somewhere very interesting today. We're going to start with a mushroom growing on a dead log, and we're going to look at what researchers found inside it, and we're going to go through the immune system, and then somehow we're going to end all the way up down into your gut. But unlike some of the other videos, I really want to follow this trail in order, because turkey tail gives us a really good example of something we've been talking about throughout all of the body systems, right? Everything connects. So let's start where turkey tail starts, on a log. So turkey tail's scientific name is Trametes versicolor. Trametes versicolor. You may also see the older name, Coriolis versicolor. Probably butchering those, but that's okay. We listen and we do not judge. So turkey tail commonly grows on dead and decaying hardwood, and visually it's a beautiful mushroom, right? You see the bands of color running across it. They can be brown, tan, cream, gray. Sometimes a rusty orange can show up, and even blue tones, right? When you find those, they're kind of phenomenal to look at. And those bands really do resemble, well, the feathers of a turkey tail. Now, if you flip turkey tail over, you won't see the traditional gills that most people associate with mushrooms. Turkey tail is what's called a polypore. Instead of gills, the underside has lots of incredibly tiny pores. And that becomes one of the several characteristics used when properly identifying this mushroom. But I'm going to put my standard disclaimer right here, right now. This is not a mushroom identification class. There are turkey tail lookalikes out there. So please don't watch this video, wander into the woods, and start gnawing on striped mushrooms. That might end very badly for you. And never quote, Sarah said this was good for me, because Sarah obviously did not. If you're interested in wild mushroom harvesting, learn proper identification from an experienced local mushroom expert, a mycologist, which is simply someone who studies the fungi. So for our purposes today, I just want you to know what turkey tail is and where the story begins. Because when you look at this little mushroom growing on a rotting log, it doesn't exactly scream immune research, right? So how did we get here to there? Like, how did that correlation become, right? So what is inside of turkey tail, right? So to answer that, we have to look inside the mushroom, and one of the groups of the compounds that has attracted a lot of attention in medicinal mushroom research is called polysaccharides. Now, the polysaccharides are basically complex carbohydrates, and among the compounds associated with fungal cell walls are the beta-glucans. And if you watched our reishi video, you've already heard that term before, and this is where I want to slow down, because the internet loves to take this information and immediately say, beta-glucans boost your immune system. Okay, but we already talked about why I don't particularly love that phrase, right? Your immune system is not a volume knob, right? We can't just pump up the volume. So we're not trying to turn it from a 7 to 11. More immune activity, well, isn't necessarily a good thing. Your immune system has to recognize things. It has to communicate. It has to respond. It has to regulate. If you turn certain responses on, you have to turn other responses down. It's an incredibly complex system. And researchers have become interested in how certain fungal beta-glucans and other polysaccharides interact with receptors and signaling pathways involved in immune function. That's a much more accurate conversation than simply saying mushroom equal immune booster. It's not how that works. Not how that works at all. So that's where turkey tail starts getting really interesting. Well, or maybe just for me. So because researchers haven't only looked at the whole, like, they haven't just studied portions of it, right? So specific preparations and compounds associated with it have been studied. And if you start researching turkey tail, you're going to run into two sets of letters, right? There's PSK and PSP. Don't panic. There's not going to be a quiz afterwards, and if you ever meet me in person, probably not going to quiz you on it. PSK refers to polysaccharide, also known as crestin, and PSP refers to polysaccharopeptide. You don't really need to memorize either one of those. What I want you to remember is that these terms refer to particular polysaccharide containing preparations that have been investigated in research. And that is the distinction that matters, right? Because now we're talking about getting into the part of turkey tail research that gets a lot of attention, which is the cancer research, right? So PSK has been extensively researched in Japan and has been used there in certain contexts, as in adjuncate, right, alongside conventional cancer treatment, right? So I want to stop right there, because the most important word in that sentence is alongside. Adjunct does not mean replace. It means something used in addition to the primary treatment. And this is where we have to be really careful about the difference between interesting research and internet holistic claims, because this standard preparation derived from medicinal mushrooms has been studied alongside conventional oncology treatment, right? That's a very different story from turkey tail cures cancer, right? They're not the same statement. They're not the same statement at all. And it's also not the same thing as buying a random bag of turkey tail powder online and assuming that all of a sudden all the research has been studied. Because this is one of the reasons I think studying medicinal mushrooms is so useful. It teaches us how to ask the better questions about the research that the internet is claiming happened, right? So what exactly did they study? Was it the whole mushroom? Was it an extract? Was it a standardized preparation? How much did the precipitant receive, right? What was the quantity or the dosage? Who were the who was participating in this study? What other treatments were they receiving other than these mushrooms? And what outcome did researchers actually measure? Because sometimes a study is genuinely exciting. Then somebody writes a headline about it. Social media gets a hold of the headline, and by the time it reaches Facebook or wherever, apparently mushrooms cure everything. Well, that's not how it works. We can respect the traditional usage, right? And we can be excited about the scientific research, and we can still be honest about what that research actually says. And all three of those things can exist at the same time. but stop falling for the clickbait headlines and actually do the research and read it for yourself. So far, the story's kind of like the story's making sense, right? So we've got turkey tail, we've got the polysaccharides, we've got the beta-glucans, right? We've got the immune signaling that we want. We've got researchers studying specific preparations of these mushrooms, everything staying nicely inside the immune system lesson. Well, and then we have to talk about our gut. So, because you can't really have a complete conversation about the immune health without eventually ending up in your gut health. A significant amount of immune activity is actually associated with your gastrointestinal tract. Think about what your digestive tract encounters every single day, right? It encounters your food. It encounters microorganisms, environmental compounds, all kinds of material from which the outside world, right? So it's always receiving. Your intestinal barrier has to help determine what gets across, what stays out, and how your body responds to what you're making it encounter. And living within that environment is an enormous community of microorganisms. And that is your microbiome, right? So what is the microbiome, right? So we're getting really heavy today, but I really wanted to invest the time with these mushrooms, right? So when we talk about the gut microbiome, we're talking about the community of microorganisms living within your digestive tract. Bacteria are a big part of that conversation, but it's more complex than just bacteria. And those organisms aren't simply passengers, right? They interact with the food we eat. They produce metabolites. They interact with the intestinal environment. They communicate directly and indirectly with immune processing. So now our immune system lesson has officially wandered back into the digestive lesson, right? So apparently, Turkey Tail did not read the textbooks either. And I've been saying this over the last couple lessons, right? Plants don't know that they're supposed to stay inside a certain body system chapter where we put them. Well, and neither do our fungus friends. They just didn't get the memo either. Apparently the plants aren't talking to the mushrooms. I don't know. Because the body isn't actually divided into little boxes. We divide it into boxes so it's easier to study, but that's not how the body works. So where does turkey tail meet the gut? Well, this brings us back to those polysaccharides that we talked about, right? Researchers have also investigated how turkey tail derived polysaccharides may influence microbial communities in your gut. And this introduces another word you've probably already heard, prebiotic, right? Now, don't confuse that with probiotic, right? A probiotic generally refers to live microorganisms that may provide a health benefit when administered in adequate amounts. A prebiotic is actually something very different. A prebiotic is essentially a substrate that can selectively be used by certain microorganisms. So here's an easy way to remember that. The probiotic is the guest, right? The prebiotic is what you're feeding the guest when it's there. So that's very simplified, but it gets us where we need to go. Some turkey tail derived polysaccharides are being studied for their potential prebiotic-like effects and how they may influence your gut microbial environment. And suddenly, this little mushroom growing on a dead log has taken us from immune signaling to gut ecology, right? And so this is the holistic lesson. And this is where I think turkey tail becomes much bigger than just a mushroom profile, because this is exactly what we've been learning through our body system series, right? So your cardiovascular system doesn't exist independently from your nervous system, right? Your nervous system does not exist independently from your digestive system. Your respiratory system does not operate without your immune system, and your immune system certainly isn't operating independently from your gut. Everything is communicating. That is holistic health, right? Never go to a doctor. Like holistic health doesn't mean never go to a doctor and just take herbs instead, right? That's not holistic. Holistic means looking at the whole picture, right? What are you eating? Are you sleeping? Are you moving your body on a daily basis? What's happening with your stress markers? What's happening in your digestive system? What medications are necessary for you currently at your current health state? What medical conditions are present in your current state? Where might herbs or mushrooms appropriately fit into the larger picture, right? Because we're looking at the whole person, not one isolated system or symptom. So gut health isn't a bottle either, right? So while we're here, I want to also clear that up, right? Gut health doesn't simply mean take a probiotic. The microbiome is an ecosystem, right? Overall, dietary patterns matter. Fiber matters. Plant diversity can matter. Sleep matters. Movement matters. You can't be lacking sleep, not moving, and eating Taco Bell every night and think you're going to be in supreme health. The environment you live in matters. If you're under a lot of stress, that's going to affect all of it. Your age matters, right? Medication can also matter. Antibiotics can seriously affect your gut microbial communities. And sometimes antibiotics are absolutely medically necessary. We're not turning this into antibiotics bad, mushrooms good, right? That's another oversimplification. What we're saying is your gut is complicated. Your immune system is complicated, and they're talking to each other. So if something tears up the communication system, well, that's when bad things happen. And that's why one supplement is not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, Sarah, what do I actually do with this thing? So now we've talked about the mushroom as the whole. We've talked about what's inside of it. We've followed through those compounds into immune research. We've followed the immune system into the gut now. So let's get practical. How do people actually prepare turkey tail? Well, first, this is not the mushroom you're probably going to saute with butter and put beside your steak. It's absolutely not. Turkey tail is tough. It's leathery. It's almost like overcooked turkey, ironically. So longer preparations are going to make sense, right? So if you've been watching for a while, you already know the word that's coming, right? Decoction, right? So this is going to be a decoction. So just like we talked about with all of our tougher roots and with reishi, a decoction uses longer simmering to extract the constituents into the water. This makes particular sense when we're interested in many of those water extractable polysaccharides we've spent the entire video talking about so far. So water isn't just the tradition here. There's chemistry behind why that preparation makes sense. So what about extracts? So you'll also find turkey tail sold as an extract, right? You'll see it as powders, capsules, liquid preparations, right? And you're going to see products made from the fruiting body, which is the actual mushroom itself, right? Products made from the mycelium, right, which is underneath, and sometimes a combination of both. So we remember, right, the mycelium from the reishi video. If you haven't seen it, just to kind of correlate, that's the network of the fungal threads growing through the tree branch that it's on. And the fruiting body is the mushroom structure that we recognize as the turkey tail, right? Neither word by itself tells you everything about the product quality. What matters is transparency, okay? So what species is this? What part of the fungus was used? Was it extracted? How was it extracted? Was the mycelium grown on grain? Was that grain organic or GMO? Does the company provide meaningful testing information, right? So one little shopping trick. So here's one thing I want you to remember when you're looking at medicinal mushroom products, okay? Because the hype is everywhere. So you may see high in polysaccharides written proudly across the front of the label. That sounds very impressive, doesn't it? Except starch is also a polysaccharide. So if you've got a product containing a lot of residual grain, right, a broad total polysaccharide number may not tell you exactly what you think about that product. This is why information about beta-glucan content can sometimes be more useful when evaluating mushroom products than vague total polysaccharide claims. The more you understand what you're looking for, the harder it becomes for somebody to sell you a pretty package with really big print on the front that means absolutely nothing. And I'm always a fan of transparency. Let's get away from the snake oil doctors, okay? So, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about safety, right? So turkey tail products appear to be well tolerated by many people, but individual reactions and digestive upset can occur. If you're taking immune modifying medications, immunosuppressive medications, or you're breastfeeding, pregnant, or managing a significant medical condition, such as cancer, talk with an appropriate healthcare professional before just adding mushrooms to your diet, because you don't know how things are going to interact, and we definitely don't want to do more harm. And because, again, because we talk specifically about like oncology research today, if you're undergoing cancer treatment, please just don't add it, right? Like I said, just because you see a promising study online, you don't know if it's going to interact with your protocol, right? So let's always be smart about it, right? I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-herbal in those cases. I'm just about, let's be transparent in everything, right? Even if it's a naturopath and not a normal doctor, like a oncology doctor, right? So we started with this little striped mushroom growing in a dead log, right? We looked inside it. We found complex polysaccharides, including beta-glucans. And those compounds took us into immune research, right? And that research included PSK and PSP. And then our immune conversation led us straight into our gut, right? And the gut brought us right back to something we've been learning through the entire series, right? The body is not a collection of isolated systems. Everything communicates, right? Everything connects. And that's really what I want you to remember from turkey tail, right? There was a song about it, right? The hip bone's connected to the leg bone, right? So this is not a list of 10 supposed benefits, right? Not some miraculous claim, not PSK or PSP. I want you to remember the connection, right? Because once we start to understand connections, we stop looking for one magic herb or one magic mushroom or one magic supplement to fix everything, right? We start looking at the whole picture, right? And that's truly where holistic health begins. The whole picture, what got us here. And apparently, as we know, the plants didn't teach the mushrooms how to read the textbooks either. So they don't know they're supposed to stay in one little world either. So until next time, guys, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, continue to grow in grace.